Hey guys, what's going on? It's Matt Wenning at winningstrength.com, and today we're going to talk about when to stop competing. Now this is very, very difficult because the issue is that everybody's in a different wheelhouse. Everybody has a different set of goals in mind, etc. So let's get to it. I'm going to go through this in about 3 steps and then let you guys decide when it's time for you to stop competing. The first step is, have you basically taken your training and prioritized it as the top thing in your life? If you've done that for a very, very long time and you're starting to get to the point where you're just not seeing any more progress, you're probably at about peak ceiling limit level where you're not going to get any better. Now for me, that was about 37, 38 years old. I had gotten up to that point where I would train an entire year and my bench went from 606 to 611. It put on 5 pounds. And that's when I started to notice that no matter how much harder I trained, the diminished returns were already starting to happen, meaning that the harder I pushed, it didn't really let my body adjust to anything. So if you're putting training as a top priority for a long, long time and you're finally starting to get to the point where you're not really progressing anymore, you may be at a point where it's time to stop competing and pushing so hard. You're probably at the point of getting ready to get injured. Everybody has a different ceiling limit. You know, when I was 19 and benched 500, I didn't know how much higher my ceiling limit on the bench could go. But to get to 500 took me from the age of about 11 years old till almost 20, right? So nearly 10 years. In 10 more years, that's what took me to get from 500 to 600. So I gained from, say, a 185 pound bench when I first started to a 500 pound bench in less than 10 years. And then from 500 to 600, it nearly took me another 10 years. Now here's where it gets crazy. From that 600 to 611 took me around 2.5 years. So the point is that the window became smaller and smaller. So the point is that if you're not getting any better, or you're only getting marginally better by a handful of pounds a year, you're probably getting to the point that you're training. Now, remember this though. I want to really reiterate this and make sure you understand. It could be because you're training incorrectly as well. So I'm not saying that it might be time to stop competing, but at the end of the day, for me, I'm just giving you my personal preferences. By the time I was 30, I knew what I was doing with training, and I was getting to the point where I was at my ceiling limits, okay? The next thing that I think you need to cover is when it's time to stop competing is when you're getting injured all the time. Now this might also, again, because you're training like an idiot, but at the end of the day, for most of us, when you hit maximum muscle tension, I know that Eddie Cohen and Charles Poliquin and myself had talked about this a ton overseas when we did a lot of seminars. And what we found was that Eddie and I and both Charles agreed is that you really only have 10 true maximum effort attempts in your entire body. This means that when are you going to use those? So I'm not saying that, like, you know, Maddox, when he breaks a world record, it doesn't look super hard. He's not at maximum tension, but when he starts to fail constantly, he's going to have anywhere from 6 to 10 of those bench presses that he can truly fail completely until his body's going to be shut down. Now, a lot of that, in my opinion, is neurological, meaning that you're starting to get psychological and neurological fatigue, and the body's just going to start shutting down. So my point is that you want to be careful, and that's why I always talk about max effort work being a 9 RPE, not a 10. So I want you guys to get this drilled through your head. You only have about 10 RPEs in your entire life once you get to a point where you're pretty good. So that means don't waste them. But if you're constantly getting injured all the time, pushing the limit or going to a competition, you're tearing this and you're pulling that, and you're having surgery on this and surgery on that, it might be time to stop competing and just start focusing on something else, okay? And I'm not saying to stop training, I'm just saying you might not want to push it to that point in that particular fashion anymore. The body's reached its genetic potential. The third major thing that I think that you have to tie in is you have to look at all of the factors when you decide if enough's enough. If you're eating every 3 or 4 hours quality food and you're sleeping 10 to 12 hours a day and you've donated 15, maybe 20 years of your life to the pursuit of getting strong and everything's tapered out, you're probably at your peak. For me, personally, I knew that had happened, again, around 36, 37, 38 years old, and there was no returns left for competing, meaning that my body was at maximum and the only thing left to do was to get injured. So instead of getting injured, I decided to retire from competing, still train like if I ever wanted to go back to competing, I would, but I cut everything at a 9 RPE now. never pushing to a 10. And what I have found is not only am I much healthier, blood pressure wise, heart rate wise, sleep wise, etc., and body weight wise, I found that the stressors of training really have dropped significantly. And that's also, again, why we push the max effort work only to a 9 RPE. So the question now comes back around is, when do we stop competing? And the answer is, it's different for everyone. If you started lifting at 35, you may not need to stop competing until you're in your 50s, maybe farther. But if you're like me and you did your first competition at 13 years old, probably going to have to hang it up after about 15 to 20 years of hard training. Some people can push it farther if they train smarter, and some people push it shorter because they train like idiots. So the point is that if you want to train smart and you want to get to your maximum genetic potential, you have to make it there. Meaning that your career is going to have to be fairly injury-free for probably about 15 to 20 years before you're ever going to see what your true body's potential is capable of. Once you reach that ceiling limit, at the end of the day, there's not really much farther you can go. Probably not a great idea to keep competing, just based on the fact of, here it is. At the end of the day, you're only going to win a medal. Only a handful of people actually even care if you even break a world record. And you don't really realize that until you've already retired. Meaning that I watch a lot of these younger guys pushing the limits, and I love to watch it. And I think that, competing in powerlifting is one of the best things in the world. But at the end of the day, you have to start deciding what the risk to benefit ratio is. I got an entire office full of medals. I got an entire office full of trophies. And now they're getting to the point where they're pretty old and only a handful of people remember them. But when I was doing that particular style of training and when I was up to that level, it was the only thing that mattered to me. And you can only live life for so long that way. Meaning that when I retired in into 2017, almost 18, my salary doubled in 18, 19, and 20. Meaning I was making way more money because I was actually more invested in helping other people versus just helping myself. So I hope this kind of helps you guys understand that this really wasn't a video on when to stop competing, even though that was the title. It's kind of a measure of when you think that you've done enough. I never personally wanted to look back on my career and say I didn't give it my all, say I didn't try as hard as I could, and didn't put lifting first so I could look back and enjoy it. Now that I'm retired from competitive lifting, I really don't have any connections mentally to it. I don't hate working out anymore. I don't hate training. And I think a lot of people, when they get to that level and they compete at that level, they realize that some of them just completely quit altogether. They don't even work out anymore. And I can understand that. But the point is keep your burnout level low and know when to kind of start transferring your training into not more maintenance, but more of a joy of working out versus trying to compete so difficult that you're neurologically burned out. I find that when working out becomes a chore, usually after about year 10, 12, maybe 15, that you're on a time clock of about 2 to 4 years. This means that you can only push for training being stressful and not fun 2 to 4 years, and you're going to force yourself to retire or get injured. So I hope this helps a little bit. Maybe analyze what you're going through, look at what the risk to benefit ratios are. And I'm not saying to not stop training. I'm saying that you guys need to understand that competing at a high level has to stop at some point. So if you guys need help or you think that you're not hitting your genetic potential, hop on, we'll help you with online coaching. At the very least, go to the website and get some manuals where we can try to show you the smarter ways to train. Because at the end of the day, if you're hitting a particular lift at a certain point where you're not getting any better, it probably for most people is a lack of understanding of how to train, lack of recovery, or a lack of all of those different variables that can make you better.